Okay, so like I was saying, this is the helix. Inside is the antihelix. The helix has one crus coming down forwards that way towards the head, and then you have the antihelix, which has two crura and a superior crura and inferior crura, and in between there's a triangular shaped kind of a fossa, and that's known as a triangular fossa. Now, by the way, right in between where the helix is and then this area, which is known as your antihelix, and kind of like this region, right under that curve is known as the scapha. Yep, it's the scapha. So I said that the external ear is composed of the auricle and the external acoustic meatus, but in a way, if you think of the story, then it helps. So you have Simba and he's stuck. So I talked about how that's the memory cue. Simba is stuck, and he's stuck in the jungle, and he's in between the tigers, and the tiger represents the tragus. And Simba represents Simba, and he's stuck between the tigers and the anti-party, so the anti-tigers, and he's stuck and he wants to escape, and as he tries to escape he goes up and up and up, and he goes up this way, and he realizes that the helix only has one route, aka one crus. And then he tries to go along the antihelix, a different path, and then he realizes that the antihelix has two crura, two paths. But still, he goes, and as he tries to go along the path to the antihelix, he realizes that there's a triangular fossa there where he could slip and fall. So he goes all the way back, and he realizes that there's an opening here. Now, he hears somebody calling him, and as he goes, and they say, "Come through the concha." Cave or concha. Now remember, here's your this whole region that leads into your external acoustic meatus is known as the concha, and Simba's the one who's traveling, and he has to go through a cave. Now that's all well and good. That's how I remember the different structures. If you just remember Simba, tragus, you can kind of guess the helix structures. That's just a little bit. Now I have, the reason why I use this is because then we can continue on with the story, and there's more and more parts to it. So the external ear goes from the auricle, and remember the external ear includes the auricle and the external acoustic meatus. Now the middle ear is then across this eardrum structure. Now the eardrum structure is also known as the doctors, it's known as the tympanic membrane. So the tympanic membrane is simply the eardrum, and the eardrum is simply the dividing line, the border between the external ear and the middle ear. So that's the eardrum or the tympanic membrane. And then after the tympanic membrane, you can see the middle ear. And actually, the tympanic membrane is kind of like a door, and attached to the door are handles. And I'll keep going with the story, but these handles are the ossicles, and these are the tiniest bones in the body, and these ossicles are attached to the posterior aspect of the eardrum or the tympanic membrane. Let's keep calling it the tympanic membrane. So the three ossicles are attached to the posterior aspect of the tympanic membrane, and they're attached like door handles. So let's say that so before we go into the tympanic membrane, I didn't talk about the external acoustic meatus. The external acoustic meatus is around 2.5 centimeters or 25 millimeters, and it is kind of different. Also the auricle is composed of elastic cartilage, and that's kind of what allows it to bend and move around so much. That's kind of what allows our ears to move around without breaking. Now, that's the elastic cartilage. Okay, fine. By the way, at the end, this part is different. This part is elastic cartilage, but this part, the lobe or the lobulus, has the most amount of adipocytes. Here you can find a lot of adipocytes, or adipocyte tissue, basically. It's fatty and it's fibro-fatty. Okay, moving on. Now let's talk about the external acoustic meatus. The external acoustic meatus is 2.5 centimeters, and it's actually divided into kind of like 3 parts. And I'm going to tell you now the outer 1/3 is cartilaginous, and the inner 2/3 are bony. And this is due to the inner 2/3 are being formed by the squamous part of the temporal bone, as well. The squamous part, and then a different part as well of the temporal bone. Now, the medial two-thirds are bony. Okay, one thing about so as Simba travels down, so we're going to follow the story. As Simba travels down through the cave, remember Conker, Simba, Kavum, he goes through the cave and as he goes along, one characteristic of the external acoustic meatus is that it's quite a bumpy journey, and that's because it's quite angled. Now, there's different angles, and the doctors, the reason why they stretch the ears back and pin them back when they want to get a look at the external acoustic meatus is so they can get a straight line through and can see through the entire way to examine pull ear. Okay, now let's say Simba goes down. As Simba goes down, he comes to a place called the umbo, and there's a door. And that door is your tympanic membrane. And as Simba reaches the tympanic membrane, somebody on the other side asks him, so there's a hand on the door, and that hand represents the handle of Malleus. So earlier I mentioned that the tympanic membrane on the posterior aspect has those three bones. So it has Malleus, Incus, and Stapes. Now the three ossicles, I said three ossicles, but I didn't tell you their names. The three ossicles are called Malleus, Incus, and Stapes. Okay, those are the names of the ossicles, and those are kind of attached to the posterior aspect of our friend here, which is our tympanic membrane. Now, if we look at that next. Okay, I'm hoping this stays up.